Thanks for this, Gary. Thank you, Leah. It's touching. I'm not going to go back as far as Bob McCon did. But thank you, Jesse, the selection committee, for the honor of being selected to the inaugural induction of EMS Legends. Also, thank you for waiving the 5-year waiting period for enshrinement. That's another Lee. I'm just, but another Hall of Fame, right? But I am truly honored, and it is now great to be known as an EMS legend instead of a dinosaur. So I'm not going to call myself a dinosaur any longer. As I worked on this speech over the last few months, many things came back to me about my career in EMS. Many things that were accomplished, and unfortunately sad things that occur when in this type of work. As I look back, I realized I was lucky to have been introduced to EMS as a city guy in 1975. I was born and raised in the Morningside neighborhood of Pittsburgh. You didn't know what EMS was. As I found out, a lot of the people that got into this field, came from the volunteer services that originated in the fire departments. It was my good fortune to be introduced to a funeral director named Frank Perman, who also owned and operated a private ambulance service, Perman Ambulance Service, in Lawrenceville on the main drag of Butler Street, not far from my home in Morningside. He gave me time to observe on the ambulances, which were Cadillacs, not horse and buggies. And we had the low ride Cadillacs. I think we had a Pontiac, and also the high top. He asked if I was interested in the work. Initially, he had me observe. He had me observe, and then when asked if I was interested in the work, and I sort of got the bug. He had me enrolled in an EMT class in Penn Hills, sponsored by the Allegheny County Fire Academy. Upon completion of the EMT class, he gave me a part-time job, which eventually led to a full-time position. Let me tell you a little bit, since I have time, let me tell you about the part-time position. You worked Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours for $50. And you were on call Saturday night and Sunday night till Monday morning about 7. For every run during those daylight hours and those night hours, you got $5. So you hope to get 10 runs so you could gross $100 for your weekend. It's things that came back to me when thinking back. And as I said, eventually it led to a full-time position and Monday through Friday job. It was hard work at times, but didn't seem like it at the time. As mentioned before, private business was a lot of transport work and not a lot of emergency runs. But we did do, once again, at that time, we did a lot of baby runs for Children's in McGee and West Penn. Similar to somebody else mentioned today, you got to learn a little bit about pediatrics. But I learned to carry and move people, get them packaged for the cold weather and keep them warm. This is something I never forgot and attempted to teach during my years in EMS. I would tell people that I worked with and supervised in my later years didn't seem to care about bundling for warmth. How about I make you stand outside in your pajamas? I also in private ambulance had to drive a Zephyl ambulance once. It was a nursing home. It was a Jewish home in back end of Squirrel Hill. My partner and I were coming out, had transported someone. Some guy sticks his head out of the back of a Zephyl ambulance and says, "Hey, can you drive for me?" we have a cardiac arrest. I said, okay. So we drove to the Montefiore. And didn't know the guy. Later, I was hired with him. I don't know if anybody ever heard of him, Jack Lass. Yeah, funny story about Jack, but there's a lot of funny stories about Jack. Was it a calling? Was it the excitement? I know that there was enjoyment. It was something different every hour of every day. Being out in the weather and not working 8 hours indoors in a cubicle and office. In the fall of 1976 until the spring of 1977, I went through the paramedic training program at Columbia Hospital, which was taught, of course, by Dr. Alan Shatner. It was great being able to know him. I remember the excitement every time I would be in a medical crisis, and it was like the textbook said it would happen if you did certain things. And you would wake up the diabetic or the overdose patient and bring back the cardiac arrest, and they would start breathing again. Here's another name we haven't heard much today. In 1978, I was interviewed by Glenn Cannon. I went into the interview, at the time they were doing a CPR instructor course. And they were going to have a CPR instructor program. And they was paying more than I was making at Permanent Ambulance. So I went to the interview. I met Glenn for the first time. He said, "You're here for the CPR class." I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you're a paramedic. I'd like to hire you to be a paramedic. Would you be interested in that?" I said, "Yes, certainly." And he said, "Okay, there's a few medical tests you have to go through," and eventually the whole group that got hired with me, 4 people, we got through those medical tests. So in 1978, I was hired by Glenn for Pittsburgh EMS. This started me on a career path that would last another 45 years after my first 3 years at Permanent Ambulance. So I went from the minors to the majors, so hence the hall. My first 2 years were spent as a paramedic on the north side of Pittsburgh at Medic 4. In a building that was built in the 1800s, horse and buggy, and I only bring this up because they tore it down last week, finally. And there's a rendering of the new Medic 4, and I have to say that my last few years as chief, we started working on that building, the construction of the architectural planning. And myself, Scott Everett, who's here today, and Rich Lynn, who's still with Pittsburgh EMS, we worked on that with the architects and everything. We also got to have some input with 2 other buildings. If they'll ever happen, we don't know, but we started the groundwork. I'm very proud to be involved with that. I was involved with that. Because I felt they should have tore that Medic 4 down in 1980. In 1980, I was promoted to crew chief and spent the next 5 years in the West End District at Medic 3. Then the next 3 years between Shadyside and Homewood, because they kept moving Medic 13 back and forth between the 2 stations. Promoted to shift supervisor, later known as district chief, in 1988 by Bob Kennedy. That lasted about 17 years. And I enjoyed that position. But in 2005, I was promoted to division chief of the ambulance division by Bob McCon. This position also handled all planning and special events in Pittsburgh for EMS. Marathons, all-star games, great races yearly, pro college, high school sporting events. Also, I was involved in the G20, luckily, that came about. What was said about that G20, about the planning happening? Bang, 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 Secret Service or the government came in and said, here's what we need you to do, this, and they put this big money sign up with a red arrow through it saying there was no There's no reimbursement for this. Someone said next to me, we need to get up and leave right now. We should have, but we weren't in charge. Eventually, I think we were reimbursed. I was very proud to have received the EMS Champions Award for a cardiac arrest save at one of the Pittsburgh marathons that I planned to EMS for. As Dr. Roth, who came across the cardiac arrest not far from the finish line, he just happened to be out walking. And he said the next thing he knew, golf carts pulled up, motorcycles pulled up, bicycles pulled up, and ambulance stretchers came out. That gentleman was resuscitated and continues to participate in the marathons, I understand. Also in that position, I was put in charge of, I had to take care of the state ambulance inspections every 3 years. So I guess my first one was around 2006. I think I did 3 over that period of time, every 3 years. And I only tell you this story because I think it's funny. Tom, I hope you laugh. You had to have a toolbox on the truck at that time. In that toolbox, one of the things you had to have was a Shields tool, which wasn't made anymore, or we would have bought them. And when I said this, I was told by the person, well, you can use a lawnmower blade. I said, well, I'm not. I said, I have 2 $1 million rescue trucks. Why do I have to use a lawnmower blade? So we had to use the old sleight of hand trick to show Shields tool in every ambulance, and that's all I'm going to say. Because I wasn't putting lawnmower blades on it. But that went away. Somebody's common sense later prevailed. In 2016, I moved into the deputy chief position, which came with new responsibilities. In 2018, I had the honor, well, that's a funny story too, as then Public Safety Director Wendell Histrich is here. Chief Bob Farrow had decided I'm leaving after 2 years as chief. I said, well, you can't leave, we're the same age, it's not time. He says, I'm leaving. So I made an appointment to see the director. I didn't get an appointment until the day after Bob left. I said, what are we going to do? He said, well, you're going to be acting chief. I said, okay, thank you. And then finally he and his appointment, and then approved by the mayor, Mayor Peduto at the time. And I was sworn in a few weeks after that. Well, maybe it was like 90 days they gave me to see if I screwed up. So I was sworn in 2018. I remained the chief until my retirement in 2023. I need to mention that I was the 7th chief of Pittsburgh EMS, and I learned and listened and learned something from all the 6 chiefs that came before me. And I appreciate their leadership and what they taught me through the years. Quite a few things happened in my 45 years. There are quite a few memorable calls, some happy. I want to share 2 with you today, just because they came back to me when I was writing this speech. While working Medic 3, dispatch for a woman that fell down the stairs. Upon arrival, we found a female, late teens, early 20s. If you can envision, she was eating ice cream and had the spoon upside down in her mouth. She fell down the steps, slipped down the steps, hit the wall at the bottom, and the spoon went down her throat. And back in those days, we were sometimes a 3-person crew, and that day we were. We found her breathing and conscious. She had difficult talking, and she had called a friend who knew something was wrong because she couldn't understand her, hence the spoon. So the friend came to the home and called 911. She was still hunched over at the bottom of the steps One of my partners decided to crawl under her to check the spoon coming out of her mouth. She, of course, drooled onto his face. Funny to me also at the time, and, and that's what I did. I laughed. We packaged her. We kept the spoon stable during transport without incident. Now this is the part that's the most interesting. A few years later, while working as a district chief, it had to be a good 5, 6 years, I took a phone call from a man that ended up being her father, who invited the three of us to attend the young lady's wedding. He believed, if not for us, she would never seen her wedding day. The three of us were able to go. We went, and we were called up and introduced by the father as he was giving his toast, and we had to have photos taken with the bride. Very, very interesting call. Then working Medic 13 in early 1986, early part of the 311 shift, I was dispatched on a minor call out of the Shadyside station. At that time, we were in Shadyside. While en route, a dispatch went out for a baby not breathing in Highland Park. We were on South Highland Avenue. I jumped on the call because we were close, just minutes away. And we arrived just as the family was trying to drive the baby by car to the hospital, not breathing. I was able to pull the baby out of the mother's arms and get him into the back of the ambulance where we were able to resuscitate prior to arrival at Children's Hospital. Why I remember this call, not only because we saved the baby, that the family with the baby, then child, then young man, would stop by at Christmas time for about the next 20 years to bring something or say hello, Merry Christmas. Last I heard, that baby was a teacher in California. I also have a very funny story, but I can't tell it here. Some of you may have told it too, but I never divulged the name, and I keep that promise today also. There are also tragedies that wish you could forget. Fire fatalities, child hit by a car you couldn't save, Western Psych shooting, 3 police officers gunned down near my home one morning. Tree of Life shooting, a worldwide pandemic, Fern Hollow Bridge collapse. The last 3 while I was chief. But I'm proud to say during the pandemic, myself, my staff, a few that are here today, we instituted strong guidelines that kept Pittsburgh EMS personnel as safe as possible and had no one admitted to the hospital, let alone die. Of course, they went off. There were illnesses, but we didn't lose anybody. I'm very proud of that, what we were able to do through that pandemic. I mean, how many chiefs get to work a worldwide pandemic? I spoke about Dr. Shatner earlier, in his training earlier, I'm sorry. He was also my first medical director. As some of you know, you would call the ED to speak with him to request orders for the patient. And as mentioned earlier, he'd tell you to save the strips. But he said it to me, so I had to say it here today, even though it's been said before. While working at Pittsburgh EMS, I had 3 of the most talented people in pre-hospital care as my medical directors. Ron Stewart, who I started with in '78, Paul Paris, and Ron Roth. Almost everyone was named Ron in this story. I thank each of them for the different things they taught me over the different parts of my career. I went to Brighton, England with Dr. Stewart to a conference, a group of us. Very interesting. I worked more closely with Dr. Roth in later years, by division chief, a deputy, then the chief. We stood together at many races, sporting events, and unfortunately at the Tree of Life. There were 7 mayors during my 45 years. I shook hands with all of them. I used to go to meetings when I became chief, and I'd say, hey, I shook hands with that statue outside, and people would leave me alone for a while. I shook hands with 2 United States presidents and 1 vice president. I placed a hair traction splint on a patient with Dr. Nancy Caroline in Shadyside Hospital ED one night. I think it was 76, while working for Permanent Ambulance. She said, you have a hair traction? I said, yeah. She said, go get it. We need it. Okay. I met Dr. Peter Safar in a fleeting moment when he was screaming orders at the back of my ambulance. I had no idea who he was. Bob McCollum was my shift supervisor. I said, get this guy away from the back of my ambulance. He's standing there yelling, don't say anything. Later, he explained to me who he was. But he was doing this while we were treating a guy from a motor vehicle crash named Dan Rooney. I met Dr. Heimlich. I met Johnny and Roy, I'm sorry. I met numerous sports figures through the years, including Art Rooney, the Chief. The bus doesn't know it, but I was responsible for him getting into the Hall of Fame. Oh, you laugh. It's with all the albuterol treatments I gave him before the game. I'm responsible for at least 2,000 yards. And before she was a star, I told Taylor Swift she did a great job singing the national anthem at the Steelers game in 2006. I was mentored by some of the greatest pioneers in the EMS field, and I am honored to be enshrined with some of them today. Many people I met and worked with during my time with Permanent Ambulance. A shout out from all the alumni from Permanent Ambulance here today. Thank you. I knew there was one here. So I met and worked with my time with Permanent Ambulance in the city of Pittsburgh. They're still my friends today, and unfortunately some of them are gone much too soon. Not only did EMS give me a great education, a successful career, while doing my hospital training in 1977 and through Dr. Shatner's plan, he sent you to Columbia or Pittsburgh. I picked Pittsburgh. It was closer to my house. I met a student nurse from Pitt who was an EKG tech working there part-time, who became the love of my life. We have 3 successful children and now 6 grandchildren. Lucy, thank you for all the support and encouragement during my career and our marriage. I wanted to thank my wife and children, Rachel, Ron Jr., Leah, as you met, my daughter-in-law Erica, my son-in-law Mitch, who are here today supporting me. I believe that whatever position or rank I held, that I gave all I had in each and every day and made a difference in many lives. While an administrator, I hope I helped the personnel that came after me as a mentor and worked hard to give them the tools they needed to do the job. There may have been some smoky mirrors at times. I'm not going to go into them. I'm guessing there will be many other things I wish I would remember to say after I'm done here today. It was a wonderful, interesting 48 years in EMS. Now a wonderful life in retirement. I do not miss the old pager going off for the phone calls in the middle of the night. Congratulations to all the other legends being inducted here today. Jesse, I want to thank you and your committee once again for my last hurrah on the big stage. I'm used to leaning against the podium or the lecture, as they say. I hope we can continue this honor for many more legends that will be retiring behind us. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad I didn't have to follow Doug Garrett.